The whispers echoing through the historic corridors of Buckingham Palace have finally materialized into a reality that has sent massive shockwaves across the entire United Kingdom and the global community. The official narrative presented to the public speaks of a sudden, groundbreaking decision made by King Charles III to officially transfer absolute operational authority and palace responsibilities directly into the hands of his younger sister, Princess Anne. To the outside world, this announcement arrived like an unexpected thunderbolt on a clear day, framed by commentators as a dramatic midnight twist in the ongoing saga of the House of Windsor. However, when one peels back the carefully managed layers of royal public relations and analyzes a precise sequence of events that have unfolded over the past several months, a completely different picture emerges. This monumental shift is far from a spontaneous or desperate act conceived during a late-night crisis meeting. Rather, it represents the only logical, structured, and rational conclusion that any modern monarch could have arrived at under the circumstances. The most intriguing element of this entire situation is not necessarily the transfer of power itself, but a highly dramatic and clandestine manner in which the palace internal machinery has chosen to present this decision to the British populace. To fully comprehend the magnitude of what has just occurred, we must meticulously examine the modern royal timeline, which serves as a fascinating map of shifting power dynamics within the family. The catalyst for this structural reconfiguration began in the early months of 2024, when King Charles received his formal medical diagnosis of cancer. Almost instantly, behind the massive stone walls of the palace, an intense recalibration began to take place out of sight. Publicly, the royal communications team maintained an impeccably measured and deeply reassuring tone, continuously issuing statements emphasizing that the sovereign remained in exceptionally good spirits and was diligently continuing his constitutional paperwork behind the desk. But away from the cameras, the reality was far more demanding. A massive logistical vacuum had opened up, and it was Princess who quietly, seamlessly, and without an ounce of hesitation stepped forward to fill the void. As the king was forced to cancel a vast array of public engagements to undergo demanding medical treatments, his sister became the visible face of the British crown. She traveled thousands of miles, attended complex ceremonies, honored long-standing public commitments, and maintained the essential visibility of the monarchy, while her brother focused on fighting a deeply personal and invisible battle against illness. Her contribution during this critical period was not just a temporary favor or a handful of sporadic appearances. Throughout the course of 2024, Princess personally executed more than 217 separate official public engagements, completely outbalancing every single senior working member of the royal family. What makes this statistic even more staggering is the fact that she maintained this grueling schedule even after suffering a severe concussion from a high-profile horse-riding accident on her estate. She literally experienced a dangerous fall, sustained significant head injuries that required hospitalization, and yet, within a remarkably short period, she put on her official attire and returned to the front lines of royal duty without uttering a single word of complaint. This is not the behavior of an individual who suddenly decides to step up because of an emergency. This is a definitive hallmark of a woman who has spent her entire adult life embodying the concepts of duty and sacrifice, simply continuing to execute her mission when the stakes became higher than ever before. Therefore, when reports began to leak to the British media regarding an incredibly tense, highly confidential late-night meeting at Buckingham Palace, where Charles allegedly summoned and a hand over full authority, an objective observer has to ask what actually changed in practice. From a functional perspective, and had already been efficiently running a massive portion of the royal operations for nearly a year. The private meeting itself is described by palace insiders in incredibly breathless, almost cinematic terms. According to confidential sources, senior aides and traditional courtiers were explicitly ordered to vacate the immediate corridors surrounding the private apartments, ensuring absolute acoustic privacy. The audience did not appear on any circular or official royal schedule, bypassing the heavily scrutinized layers of administration that typically govern every single second of a monarch's day. In an institution as profoundly obsessed with scheduling, precedent, and meticulous documentation as Buckingham Palace, an unscheduled late-night gathering completely free of staff presence does not happen by accident. It is an extraordinary departure from established protocol, indicating that the topics being discussed were of such profound institutional sensitivity that they could not risk being witnessed or overheard by the wrong individuals within the palace hierarchy. While the public media focuses heavily on the sheer drama of these cleared hallways and hushed conversations, we must separate the theatrical elements from the practical realities faced by the king. Charles is currently confronting an incredibly demanding health situation, and close sources describe him as being visibly exhausted by the physical toll of his treatment, yet completely unwavering in his long-term strategic vision for the crown. This vital distinction between physical exhaustion and structural uncertainty is crucial to understanding the path forward. Charles may be carrying an immense physical burden, but his ultimate decision to officially rely on Princess and is a result of decades of profound, unbreakable trust. It is a historical connection that was highly visible during his magnificent coronation ceremony in May of 2023, where he chose his sister to fulfill the historic and highly symbolic role of gold stick in waiting. On that monumental day, and rode prominently on horseback, commanding and leading over 6,000 elite members of the armed forces as they escorted the newly crowned king through the historic streets of London. It was an immensely powerful personal statement to the world, demonstrating that on the most significant day of his life, Charles trusted absolutely no one more than his sister to guard his back and stand firmly by his side. This deep institutional trust was further codified into law later that same year, when the British Parliament formally expanded the list of councillors of state to specifically include Princess, and granting her the legal and constitutional authority to act directly on behalf of the monarch if he became incapacitated. Traditionally, these powerful positions are strictly reserved for the monarch's spouse and the next 4 adults in the direct line of succession, but Charles actively chose to break with rigid tradition to ensure his sister was included, a clear indication that the foundation for this current transfer of power was laid long before any secret midnight meeting took place. To understand why this choice is so profoundly significant, we must step away from the immediate geopolitical calculations and examine the deeply rooted personal architecture that underpins a specific royal decision. When a reigning monarch is forced to delegate substantial power, the conventional pathways of palace protocol point toward a few predictable figures, most notably the direct heir to the throne or the queen consort. Yet, in this extraordinary instance, King Charles bypassed the standard operational procedures of the House of Windsor to place his complete institutional trust in Princess Anne. This choice becomes undeniably logical only when one examines the intricate, lifelong dynamics that exist between the king and the Princess Royal. The deep bond connecting them is not something that was constructed recently out of political necessity or sudden panic. It is an unbreakable foundation forged over more than 7 decades of shared history. Born just 21 months apart, with Charles arriving in November of 1948 and following in August of 1950, the siblings were effectively each other's very first true companions in a highly surreal world where exceptionally few people could ever comprehend what it truly meant to grow up as a child of the British Crown. During their formative years, their parents, the late Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, were frequently away for months at a time on exhausting, high-profile royal tours across the Commonwealth. Left behind in the vast, quiet nurseries of the palace, Charles and Anne spent the vast majority of their childhood entirely in each other's company. They played together on the sweeping palace grounds, studied under the same private tutors, and navigated the intense, isolating pressures of their unique environments side by side. While they were completely denied the ordinary freedoms that normal children enjoyed, they discovered a profound sense of security and stability in each other. These early years formed a powerful, permanent psychological connection between 2 individuals with completely contrasting personalities. Charles was historically known to be highly sensitive, deeply artistic, reflective, and often plagued by internal self-doubt, and by contrast, emerged as an intensely confident, direct, practical, and fiercely independent individual. Where her brother hesitated over complex emotional nuances and acted with swift precision, where Charles experienced moments of vulnerability or uncertainty, his younger sister provided an unshakable pillar of courage and clarity. Their profound differences did not create a distance between them. Instead, their personalities complemented each other perfectly, creating a highly effective internal partnership. One of the most defining testaments to this lifelong sibling loyalty occurred during Charles's incredibly difficult years at Gordonstoun, the notoriously rigorous Scottish boarding school that his father insisted he attended to build character. Charles famously detested the institution, privately describing the harsh conditions, cold showers, and intense social isolation as absolute misery throughout that profoundly traumatic period of his youth, and served as one of the very few individuals in whom he could completely and safely confide. She listened to his struggles without an ounce of judgment and fiercely defended him from cruel teasing within the wider extended royal circles. In a family dynamic where personal vulnerability was often viewed as a weakness and duty was valued above individual emotion, that level of unconditional, protective loyalty was exceptionally rare. As they transitioned into adulthood and faced the intense glare of global media scrutiny, this protective bond remained entirely unbroken. During the turbulent decades of the 1980s and 90s, when Charles's highly publicized marital difficulties with Princess Diana dominated international headlines, and deliberately chose to stay completely clear of the media circus. She steadfastly refused to grant sensationalized interviews, actively avoided palace gossip, and provided a quiet, private sanctuary of emotional support for her brother when his public reputation was at its absolute lowest point. This unyielding sisterly support has continued into their senior years, becoming particularly visible following profound losses of their parents. During the massive state funeral procession for Queen Elizabeth II, Charles and walked directly side by side behind the coffin, frequently exchanging quiet, supportive words during the long, emotionally draining public ceremonies. In those deeply somber moments broadcast to billions of viewers worldwide, the public could easily perceive not only their shared grief, but also the immense comfort they derived from simply having each other close during a time of immense transition. Therefore, when looking at the contemporary crisis surrounding the king's health, the decision to elevate and is the culmination of a lifelong realization that she is the only person who has known Charles the longest, who has witnessed him at his absolute worst, and who has never once wavered in her absolute protection of him. Beyond this deep emotional matrix, princess and possesses an unparalleled reputation within the British establishment for bringing immediate structural order whenever things begin to fracture. She has long been referred to by royal historians as the firm backbone of the family, a title she earned through decades of relentless, unglamorous hard work. She commenced her official public duties at the exceptionally young age of 19, joining her parents on a demanding, month-long tour of Australia and New Zealand, and immediately assumed the presidency of Save the Children UK in 1970. She never viewed her royal patronages as mere superficial titles or opportunities for favorable publicity. Instead, she traveled extensively to some of the most impoverished and dangerous communities across the globe for nearly 50 years, pushing for tangible operational changes. Queen Elizabeth highly valued his tireless efforts as a vital form of quiet diplomacy, viewing her as an essential human face for a changing institution. Crucially, during eras when other prominent members of the royal family faced devastating personal scandals, financial criticisms, or intense public backlashes, and professional record remained completely pristine, she systematically avoided the pursuit of media attention, glamour, or personal celebrity, choosing instead to simply show up every day and execute the work demanded of her. This steadfast dedication has reflected strongly in modern public opinion polling, where Princess consistently ranks as one of the most positively viewed senior members of the royal family, frequently securing an exceptionally high favorability rating among the British public, standing firmly alongside Prince William and Catherine. This enduring popularity is not driven by calculated media campaigns, but by a deep, widespread public trust. In a family that is frequently buffeted by intense controversy, rapid societal changes, and unpredictable internal dramas, and represents an unshakable, permanent anchor of reliability that both the king and the nation can completely depend upon during times of structural uncertainty. However, beneath the heavy layers of structural logic, emotional security, and long-standing public approval, there exists another highly compelling dimension to this historic transfer of power that complicates the official narrative in an incredibly fascinating way. For months, highly sensitive reports have steadily emerged from behind palace walls, suggesting profound and enduring undercurrent of tactical tension between Princess and Queen Camilla. If these complex insider accounts are accurate, they inject an entirely new geopolitical dynamic into why the Princess Royal's newly elevated role carries such immense institutional significance. According to strategic palace sources, during a prominent royal banquet filled with international dignitaries, an event that was meant to showcase seamless family elegance and polite diplomatic conversation, and reportedly turned to Camilla and delivered a direct, calculated sentence that instantly pierced through the room's formal atmosphere. Sources allege that the Princess Royal firmly stated that Camilla was legally the queen consort, not the reigning queen, causing immediate, dead silence to descend upon the surrounding courtiers. While the public may never fully verify the exact linguistic phrasing used during that specific encounter, the underlying psychological sentiment aligns perfectly with everything the global public knows about EL&JHAN's unyielding character. She was fiercely, unconditionally loyal to the memory and legacy of her late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, who had famously and deliberately clarified her official wish that Camilla should hold the specific title Queen Consort, a highly respectful nod to centuries of royal tradition and the enduring historical shadow of Princess Diana, and reportedly deemed it her absolute duty to remind Camilla of this definitive constitutional boundary on multiple occasions, explicitly noting that the late monarch's wishes were absolute and must be respected without deviation. The core of the tension, according to senior insiders, stemmed from a growing perception that Camilla was systematically overreaching her established boundaries, quietly expanding her administrative influence within the inner royal court, and subtly reshaping the traditional power structures of the family to favor her own network. What began as quiet whispers of discontent among veteran palace staffers rapidly evolved into a silent but fierce battle of strategic wills, playing out through cold glances, guarded scheduling conflicts, and heavily insulated conversations. At the absolute center of the structural vortex stood King Charles, constantly pulled between a fiercely protective sister defending their mother's historic legacy and a determined wife seeking to actively shape the contemporary chapter of the British monarchy. Given this highly charged internal landscape, Charles's definitive decision to officially hand absolute operational authority to and takes on incredibly profound political meaning. It is no longer just a practical, temporary administrative move designed to ensure institutional stability during his medical treatment. It is a powerful, definitive statement regarding whose judgment, character, and loyalty he trusts most when the future of the crown is actively on the line. By ensuring that and holds complete dominion over key palace responsibilities, the king has effectively signaled that when he is physically unable to govern, his sister's voice carries the absolute weight of the sovereign, completely neutralizing any potential administrative overreach by the queen consort. This monumental choice explains the extraordinary secrecy surrounding the midnight meeting, which bypassed the traditional machinery of palace public relations to avoid any preemptive internal pushback. Beyond these high-stakes political battles, the story also possesses a deeply practical, material side that connects directly to Anne's private financial estate and the broader economic stability of her immediate family line. Princess Anne permanently resides at Buckingham Park, a spectacular 730-acre private estate located in Gloucestershire, which was originally purchased by Queen Elizabeth II in 1976 for a substantial sum. Today, the historic property is conservatively valued at approximately £15 million, encompassing a magnificent manor house, world-class equestrian facilities, and additional private residences occupied by Anne's children, Zara Tyndall and Peter Phillips. While the Princess Royal fully intends to pass this historic family sanctuary down to her direct descendants, the British legal system presents an incredibly steep financial obstacle in the form of inheritance tax, which is strictly charged at a massive 40% on any private estate exceeding the standard threshold. For Zara and Peter, inheriting Buckingham Park outright could result in an immediate, devastating tax bill of nearly £2.28 million, a massive financial liability that by law must be fully resolved within a strict 6-month window. Managing this impending transition requires meticulous, long-term legal planning, utilizing strategic exemptions such as transferring the asset through spousal allowances to Sir Timothy Lawrence to completely defer the tax burden, or utilizing complex lifetime gifting strategies and agricultural property reliefs over a multi-year period. This urgent financial landscape brings into sharp focus the steady, quiet figure of Sir Timothy Lawrence, who has existed gracefully in the margins of the British royal family for over 3 decades. Present, unfailingly loyal, and almost entirely invisible to the sensationalist media, Timothy has long mastered the sophisticated art of silence within the volatile House of Windsor, a highly disciplined former naval officer who graduated from the University of Durham, he climbed the ranks of the Royal Navy with quiet distinction before being appointed as a trusted equerry to Queen Elizabeth II in the 1980s. It was within this dedicated space of absolute service and secrecy that he first met Princess, and during the difficult collapse of her first marriage. Timothy was fundamentally different from the chaotic personalities surrounding the court. He was profoundly disciplined, exceptionally discreet, and an unshakable source of calm stability. Their quiet partnership culminated in a modest, private wedding ceremony near Balmoral in 1992, entirely stripped of grand pageantry. Unlike others who married into the crown, he never demanded noble titles, princely honors, or official state salaries, choosing to stand respectfully 2 steps behind his wife, while remaining an irreplaceable pillar of strength beside her through every family crisis, funeral, and foreign deployment. Therefore, when King Charles recently broke with standard practice to personally confer upon Sir Timothy the prestigious title of Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order, seasoned royal observers recognized the profound hidden language of the monarchy at play. This was not a routine, meaningless gesture. It was a highly calculated public message of profound gratitude from the king to the man who protected his sister and served the crown without a single complaint for 30 years. The precise timing of this honor, arriving directly alongside Anne's dramatic elevation to absolute palace authority, is completely intentional, signaling the total alignment of the king's inner circle. Ultimately, the dramatic narrative of a shocking, sudden midnight coup that sent massive shockwaves through modern Britain collapses under the weight of objective history. When one analyzes the deep childhood bonds, the decades of flawless public service, the high public approval ratings, and the unyielding trust between the siblings, this transfer of power stops looking like a sudden twist and starts looking entirely inevitable. King Charles did what any brilliant, rational leader does when facing profound uncertainty. He placed the most reliable, unshakable person he has ever known in complete control of the institution. When everything was on the line, the king turned to the Princess Royal, the sister who has never once let him down since the very beginning.